Gregor the Overlander, Part 2, The Quest. Last time we read, Vicus pulled out the keychain that belonged to Gregor's dad. And the last line says his father never went anywhere without it. When Gregor's heart started up again, it beat so hard he thought it might break through his chest. His hand reached out on its own, his fingers grasping for the keychain. Where'd you get that? I told you other Overlanders have fallen. Some years ago, we rescued one very like you in face and feature. I cannot recall the exact date, said Vicus, placing the keychain in Gregor's hand. 2 years, 7 months, and 13 days ago, thought Gregor. Aloud, he said, it belongs to my dad. Waves of happiness washed over him as he ran his fingers over the worn leather braid and the metal snap that allowed you to attach it to your belt loop. Memories flashed through his mind. His dad fanning out the keys to find the one to open the front door. His dad jingling the keys in front of Lizzie in her stroller. His dad on a picnic blanket in Central Park using a key to pry open a container of potato salad. Your father? Luxa's eyes widened and a strange expression crossed her face. Vicus, you do not think he... I do not know, Luxa, but the signs are strong, said Vicus. My mind has been on little else since he arrived. Luxa turned to Gregor, her violet eyes quizzical. What? What was her problem now? Your father, like you, was desperate to return home. With much difficulty, we persuaded him to stay some weeks, but the strain proved too great, and one night, also like you, he slipped away, said Vicus. The rats reached him before we did. Gregor smashed into reality, and the joy drained out of him. Of course, there were no other living Overlanders in Regalia. Vicus had told him that in the stadium. His dad had tried to get home and had met up with the same fate Gregor had. Only the Underlanders hadn't been there to save him. He swallowed the lump in his throat. He's dead then. So we assumed. But then came rumor the rats had kept him living, said Vicus. Our spies confirm this regularly. He's alive? Asked Gregor, feeling hope rush back through him. But why? Why didn't they kill him? We know not why with certainty, but I have suspicions. Your father was a man of science, was he not? Asked Vicus. Yeah, he teaches science, said Gregor. He couldn't make sense of what Vicus was saying. Did the rats want his dad to teach chemistry? In our conversations, it was clear he understood the workings of nature, said Vicus, of trapped lightning, of fire, of powders that explode. Gregor was beginning to catch his drift. Look, if you think my dad's making guns or bombs for the rats, you can forget it. He would never do that. It is hard to imagine what any of us would do in the caves of the rats, said Vicus gently. To keep sanity must be a struggle. To keep honor, a Herculean feat. I am not judging your father, only seeking to explain why he survived so long. The rats fight well in close range, but if we attack from afar, they have no recourse but to run. Of all things, they wish a way to kill us at a distance, said Luxa. She didn't seem to be accusing his father either, and she didn't seem mad at him anymore. Gregor wished she'd stop staring at him. My wife, Solveig, has a different theory, said Vicus, brightening a little. She believes the rats want your father to make them a thumb. A thumb? Asked Gregor. Boots held up her thumb to show him. Yeah, little girl, I know what a thumb is, he said, smiling down at her. Rats have no thumbs, and therefore cannot do many things that we can. They cannot make tools or weapons. They are masters of destruction, but creation evades them, said Vicus. Be glad, Overlander. If they believe your father can be useful, it is all that will give him time, said Luxa sadly. Did you meet my dad too? He asked. No, she replied. I was too young for such meetings. Luxa was still concerned with her dolls then, said Vicus. Gregor tried hard to imagine Luxa with a doll and couldn't. My parents met him and spoke well of him, said Luxa. Her parents. She'd still had parents then. Gregor wondered about how the rats had killed them, but knew he'd never ask. Luxa speaks true. At present, the rats are our bitter enemies. If you meet a rat outside the walls of Regalia, you have two choices, to fight or to be killed. Only the hope of a great advantage would keep a human alive in their paws, especially an Overlander, said Vicus. I don't see why they hate us so much, said Gregor. He thought of Shed's burning eyes, his last words. Overlander, we hunt you to the last rat. Maybe they knew how people in the overland tried to trap, poison, and kill off all the rats above ground, except the ones they used in lab experiments. Vicus and Luxa exchanged a look. We must tell him, Luxa. He must know what he faces, said Vicus. Do you really think it is he? She said. Who? He who? Said Gregor. He had a bad feeling about where this conversation was going. Vicus rose from the table. Come, he said, and headed out the door. Gregor got up, willing his stiff arms to carry Boots. He and Luxa reached the door at the same time and stopped. After you, he said. She glanced at him sideways and followed Vicus. The halls were lined with Underlanders who watched them pass in silence and then broke into whispers. They did not have to go far before Vicus stopped at a polished wooden door. Gregor realized it was the first wooden thing he'd seen in the Underland. What had Vicus said about something being as rare as trees? For trees, you needed lots of light, so how would they grow here? Vicus pulled out a key and opened the door. He took a torch from a holder in the hall and led the way in. Gregor stepped into a room that seemed to be an empty stone cube. On every surface were carvings. Not just the walls, but the floor and ceiling too. These weren't the frolicking animals he'd seen elsewhere in Regalia. These were words. Tiny words that must have taken forever to chisel out. ABC, said Boots, which is what she always said when she saw letters. ABCD, she added for emphasis. These are the prophecy of Bartholomew of Sandwich, said Vicus. Once we sealed the gates, he devoted the rest of his life to recording them. I bet he did, thought Gregor. It sounded like just the kind of thing old crazy Sandwich would do, drag a bunch of people underground and lock himself in a room and chip out more crazy stuff on the walls. So, what do you mean prophecies? Asked Gregor. Although he knew what prophecies were, they were predictions of what would happen in the future. Most religions had them, and his grandma loved a book of them by a guy named Nostra something. To hear her talk the future was pretty depressing. Sandwich was a visionary, said Vicus. He foretold many things that have happened to our people. And a bunch that haven't? Asked Gregor, trying to sound innocent. He hadn't ruled out prophecies entirely, but he was skeptical about anything Sandwich came up with. Besides, even if someone told you something that would happen in the future, what could you do about it? Some we have not yet unraveled, admitted Vicus. He foretold my parents' end, said Luxa sorrowfully, running her fingers over part of the wall. There was no mystery in that. Vicus put his arm around her and looked at the wall. No, he said. He agreed softly. That was as clear as water. Gregor felt awful for about the 10th time that night. From now on, whatever he thought, he would try to talk about the prophecies with respect. But there is one that hangs most heavily over our heads. It is called the prophecy of Gray. For we know not whether it be fair or foul, said Vicus. We do know that it was to Sandwich the most sacred and maddening of his visions, for he could never see the outcome, although it came to him many times. Vicus gestured to a small oil lamp that illuminated a panel of the wall. It was the only light in the room besides the torch. Maybe they kept it burning constantly. Will you read? Asked Vicus, and Gregor approached the panel. The prophecy was written like a poem, in 4 parts. Some of the lettering was odd, but he could make it out. ABC, said Boots, touching the letters. Gregor began to read. Beware, Underlanders. Time hangs by a thread. The hunters are hunted. White water runs red. The Gnars will strike to extinguish the rest. The hope of the hopeless resides in a quest. An overland warrior, a son of the sun, may bring us back light, he may bring us back none. But gather your neighbors and follow his call, or rats will most surely devour us all. 2 over, 2 under of royal descent, 2 flyers, 2 crawlers, 2 spinners ascent. 1 Gnar beside, and 1 lost up ahead, and 8 will be left when we count up the dead. The last who will die must decide where he stands. The fate of the 8 is contained in his hands. So bid him take care, bid him look where he leaps, as life may be death, and death life again reaps. Gregor finished the poem and didn't quite know what to say. He blurted out, What's that mean? Vicus shook his head. No one knows for certain. It tells of a dark time when the future of our people is undecided. It calls for a journey, not just of humans, but of many creatures, which may lead either to salvation or ruin. The journey will be led by an overlander. Yeah, well, I got that part, this warrior guy, said Gregor. You asked why the rats hate Overlanders so deeply. It is because they know one will be the warrior of the prophecy, said Vicus. Oh, I see, said Gregor. So when's he coming? Vicus fixed his eyes on Gregor. I believe he is already here. Chapter 11. Gregor awoke from a fitful sleep. Images of blood-red rivers, his dad surrounded by rats, and Boots falling into bottomless caverns had wove in and out of his dreams all night long. Oh, yeah, and then there was that warrior thing. He had tried to tell them when Vicus had implied that he was the warrior in the prophecy of Grey. Gregor had actually laughed. But the man was serious. You've got the wrong guy, Gregor had said. Really, I promise, not a warrior. Why pretend and get their hopes up? Samurai warriors, Apache warriors, African warriors, medieval warriors. He'd seen movies. He'd read books. He didn't in any way resemble any warrior. First of all, they were grown up, and they usually had a lot of special weaponry. Gregor was 11, and unless you counted a 2-year-old sister as special weaponry, he'd come empty-handed. Also, Gregor was not into fighting. He'd fight back if someone jumped him at school, but that didn't happen often. He wasn't all that big, but he moved fast, and people didn't like to mess with him. Sometimes he'd step in if a bunch of guys were pounding a small kid. He hated seeing that. But he never picked fights, and wasn't fighting what warriors mainly did. Vicus and Luxa had listened to his protests. He thought he might have convinced Luxa. She didn't have a very high opinion of him anyway, but Vicus was more persistent. How many Overlanders survived the fall to the Underland, do you suppose? I would guess a 10th. And how many survived the rats after that? Perhaps another 10th? So out of 1,000 Overlanders, let us say 10 survive. How passing strange is it that not only your father, but you and your sister come alive to us, said Vicus. I guess it's kind of strange, admitted Gregor, but I don't see why that makes me the warrior. You will when you better understand the prophecy, said Vicus. Each person carries their own destiny. These walls tell of our destiny, and your destiny, Gregor, requires you to play a role in it. I don't know anything about this destiny, said Gregor. I mean, my dad and Boots and I, we all have the same laundry room, and we landed somewhere pretty close to you, so I'm thinking it's more of a coincidence. I'd like to help, but you guys are probably going to have to wait a little longer for your warrior. Vicus just smiled and said they would put it before the council in the morning. This morning. Now. Despite all of his worries, and he had plenty, Gregor couldn't deny a feeling of giddy happiness that shot through him periodically. His dad was alive. Almost instantly, another wave of anxiety would rush over him. Yeah, he's alive, but imprisoned by rats. Still, his grandma always said, where there's life, there's hope. Boy, wouldn't his grandma love it if she knew he was talked about in a prophecy? But, of course, that wasn't him. That was some warrior guy who would hopefully make an appearance really soon and help him get his dad free. That was his main goal now. How could he rescue his dad? The curtain pulled open, and Gregor squinted at the light. Mareth stood in the doorway. The swelling in his face had gone down, but his bruises were all going to be there for a while. Gregor wondered if the guard was still angry with him, but Mareth sounded calm. Gregor, the Overlander, the council requests your presence, he said. If you make haste, you may wash and eat first. Okay, said Gregor. He started to rise and realized Boots' head was cradled on his arm. He eased himself up without waking her. What about Boots? She may sleep on, said Mareth. Dulcet will watch over her. Gregor bathed quickly and dressed in fresh clothes. Mareth led him to a small room where a meal was laid out, then stood watch at the door. Hey, Mareth, he said, drawing the guard's attention. How is everybody? I mean, Perdita and the bats, are they okay? Perdita has woken finally. The bats will mend, said Mareth evenly. Oh, that's great, said Gregor with relief. After his father's situation, the thing pressing most on him had been the condition of the Underlanders. He wolfed down bread, butter, and a mushroom omelet. He drank hot tea made of some sort of herb, and energy seemed to pour through him. Are you ready to face the council? Asked Mareth, seeing his empty plate. All set, said Gregor, springing up. He felt better than he had since he had reached the Underland. News of his dad and the Underlanders' recovery, sleep, and food had revived him. The council, a group of 12 older Underlanders, had gathered at a round table in a room off the high hall. Gregor saw Vicus and Solovey, who gave him an encouraging smile. Luxa was also there, looking tired and defiant. Gregor bet she'd been chewed out for joining the rescue party last night. He was sure she hadn't acted one bit sorry. Vicus introduced the people around the table. They all had funny-sounding names that Gregor immediately forgot. The council began to ask him questions, all kinds of things like when he was born, and did he know how to swim, and what he did in the Overland. He couldn't figure out why a lot of the stuff was important. Did it really matter that his favorite color was green? But a couple of Underlanders were scribbling down every word he said like it was golden. After a while, the council seemed to forget he was there, and they argued among themselves. He caught phrases like, a son of the sun, and white water runs red, and knew they were talking about the prophecy. Excuse me, he finally broke in. I guess Vicus didn't tell you, but I'm not the warrior. Look, please, what I really need is for you guys to help me bring my dad home. Everyone at the table stared at him for a moment and then began to talk with greater excitement. Now he kept hearing the words, follow his call. Finally, Vicus rapped on the table for order. Members of the council, we must decide. Here sits Gregor the Overlander. Who counts him the warrior of the prophecy of Grey? 10 of the 12 raised their hands. Luxa kept her hands on the table. Either she didn't think she didn't think he was the warrior, or she wasn't allowed to vote. Probably both. We believe you to be the warrior, said Vicus. If you call us to help you regain your father, then we will answer your call. They were going to help him. Who cared why? Okay, great, said Gregor. Whatever it takes. Believe whatever you want. That's fine. We must begin the journey with all haste, said Vicus. I'm ready, said Gregor eagerly. Let me just get boots and we can go. Ah, yes, the baby, said Solovey, and another round of arguments ensued. Wait, shouted Vicus. This costs much time. Gregor, we do not know that the prophecy includes your sister. What? Said Gregor. He couldn't remember the prophecy very well. He had to ask Vicus if he could get in the room and read it again. The prophecy mentions 12 beings. Only 2 are described as overlanders. You and your father fill that number, said Solovey. The prophecy also speaks of one lost. That may be your father, in which case Boots is the second overlander, but it may also be a rat, said Vicus. The journey will be difficult. The prophecy warns that 4 of the 12 will lose life. It may be wiser to leave Boots here. From around the table came a general murmur of assent. Gregor's head began to swim. Leave Boots? Leave her here and regale you with the Underlanders? He couldn't do that. It wasn't that he thought they'd mistreat her, but she'd be so lonely, and what if he and his dad didn't make it back? She'd never get home. Still, he knew how vicious the rats were, and they would be hunting him to the last rat. He didn't know what to do. He looked at the set faces and thought the Underlanders had already decided to split them up. Stay together. Wasn't that what his mom always told him when he took his sisters out? Stay together. Then he noticed Luxa was avoiding his gaze. She had intertwined her fingers on the stone table before her and was staring at them tensely. What would you do if it were your sister, Luxa? He asked. The room got very quiet. He could tell the council didn't want to hear her opinion. I have no sister, Overlander, said Luxa. Gregor felt disappointed. He heard a murmur of approval from some of the council members. Luxa's eyes flashed around the table and she scowled. But if I did, and I were you, I would never take my eyes off her. He said, thank you. But she didn't think he could hear him in this loud round of objections that poured from the council. He raised his voice. If Boots doesn't go, I don't go. The room was in an uproar when the bat veered through the doorway and crashed onto the table, silencing everyone. A ghostly woman slumped over the bat, pressing her hands to her chest to stem the flow of blood. One of the bat's wings folded in, but the other extended at an awkward angle, clearly broken. Angel is dead. Daphne is dead. The rats found Shed Finger. King Gorger has launched his armies. They come for us, gasped the woman. Vicus caught the woman as she collapsed. How many, Kita? He asked. Many, she whispered. Many rats. And she went limp.